on Facebook, but for some reason, my YouTube, it could be me, but you can tell him to go ahead and see if he can work on my feed there via the live chat on YouTube. But it is coming through loud and clear. I see it on Facebook, but I don't know if that's something our associate engineer can. Oh, yeah, there he is. Good job. Whatever he did, it worked. So fantastic. Nice work. Go ahead. Sorry, chap.
Okay. All right, without any further ado, let's go to the first chapter, and that takes us to National Signing Day, which is always a big holiday for Michigan football fans, not necessarily for Michigan State football fans. And it was a holiday for Michigan fans, but it was a holiday with a little bit of trepidation because everybody was wondering, is Jim Harbaugh going to sign a contract extension before players decide to send in their letters of intent? Is anybody going to waver? Is anybody going to flip? And what we found out from the Michigan standpoint is that there was a little bit of drama. Two players did decide to flip. Brandon Jennings, a 4-star linebacker, flipped to Maryland. Defensive end Quentin Somerville, another 4-star, flipped to UCLA. So bad news on the defensive front for Michigan football. Perhaps they were swayed by Harbaugh not signing an extension. He still has not signed an extension, but there was some good news. Donovan Edwards, the 4-star running back from West Bloomfield, Michigan, did, after narrowing his choices down to 3 schools, selected the University of Michigan, unsurprisingly, over, it was Penn State, and I forget the other school. What was the other one, Dennis?
Well, he liked Alabama and Georgia, I think.
Yeah, I think Georgia was the other one in his top 3, but he picked the Michigan Wolverines. Everybody else, though, decided to sign with the University of Michigan. According to the 24/7 rankings, Michigan has the number 12 recruiting class in the country. As for the Spartans, they finished with the 33rd recruiting class in the country, although they could not be done. They might not be done yet because they actually had perhaps even more drama or as much drama as Michigan State. 4-star defensive tackle Rayshawn Benny of Oak Park said that he's still not committed, said he's still committed but wants to sign in February. 4-star running back Audric Estime of New Jersey said that he planned to sign in February, but then just a couple of hours ago he tweeted out that he's going to make his decision and sign tomorrow. And he has been listening to Iowa, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, and Penn State, along with Michigan State. And his 3-star offensive lineman teammate Gino Vandemark has not signed yet. 24/7 Sports gives Michigan State the 33rd ranked class in the country, 9th in the Big Ten, and that does not include their transfer quarterback Anthony Rousseau from Temple. Dennis, when you look at Michigan, when you look at Michigan State, perhaps you want to start off with the Wolverines. What do you think about their national signing days?
Well, I'll start with Michigan State, just to throw a curveball at you right off the bat. I thought Mel Tucker did a pretty good job here. You know, he flipped that USC linebacker, and I think his brother wants to follow in his footsteps. So that's a pretty good job. And, you know, Michigan State, all those years, Mark D'Antonio did a great job. Like, he would get guys, like he would have recruiting classes in the 40s and 50s, and he'd come in and, you know, he would turn those guys into first-round draft picks. So he did an amazing job. But Mel Tucker, you know, to come up and get a class in the low 30s, that's a good job in his first time out with, you know, the limitations and not being able to work in state and everything else. So I think he did a really good job there. The Rashawn Benny one's going to be interesting. You know, he liked Michigan the whole time until that Michigan State game, and he was like, whoa, maybe I picked the wrong school. So I don't know. And generally, I was told today when recruits that have committed and are going to be early signings get cold feet and then put it off to the next signing period, that usually spells trouble for that particular school. But we'll see. That running back also, you know, he had his eyes on Notre Dame there as well, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him pick the Irish. But good job anyways there for Mel Tucker in his first time out. I did see a tweet. It was a tweet or a screenshot that a Spartan, a friend of mine, put up, and, you know, Tucker was out there saying we're a national program, you know, so he's widening it out there, going from, you know, coast to coast, and seeing if he can go high and low in the future. But, you know, that's nothing wrong with a little confidence when you get in there in your first year. As far as Michigan goes, as you know, I was expecting the worst. I thought it could have been Armageddon yesterday for the Wolverines, but it started out early in the morning. The huge part was that they got their most highly thought of recruit, and he happens to be a quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, who was solid and signed. And then he picked up the phone and started telling everybody else, "Hey, let's do it. It doesn't matter what's going on. Let's get it done." And to be able to haul in a class in the top 15 is semi shocking, surprising to me. I hope those kids know what they're doing here, but it gets back to, Harbaugh did a good job being able to get Donovan Edwards and being able to get Xavier Worthy, this wide receiver from California who looked like he was going to go to Alabama. At least people were scared because he was committed to Michigan and then opened it back up. But it could have been better. If he had actually committed himself instead of flirting with the NFL. So that's still out there. He's apparently talking today, of all days, like he's let this play out, but now he's got in discussions with Ward Manuel. So I don't know. It's bizarre. And, despite Jim Harbaugh, Michigan comes in and doesn't do a halfway job bad, or doesn't do a half. What's the phrase I'm looking for?
It wasn't half bad.
Yeah, it wasn't half bad for Jim Harbaugh. Nice job.
Yeah, when I look at Michigan State, I'll start off with them. I think that when you consider the fact that Mel Tucker came in, in February or March after National Signing Day, he didn't get spring practice, and then because of the coronavirus, basically nobody's been able to visit the campus, and he probably hasn't visited many players across the country. To get a pretty much a Mark D'Antonio-esque recruiting class with all 3 stars. They have 1 4-star committed. They've got the 2 4-stars that we just highlighted, committed but not signed, and then another 3-star committed but not signed. I think that's pretty good because I think a lot of these guys probably never visited the campus. A lot of these guys probably never had any interaction with anyone from the coaching staff outside of Zoom. So to get a top 33 or top 35, certainly if you want to be cautious, a top 40 recruiting class, given those circumstances, is pretty good. Rayshawn Benny saying that he just wants to wait it out until February. I agree. That is a little bit concerning when he says, yeah, I'm committed, but I just want to wait until February. Is he concerned that perhaps a defensive coach might want to flip, or not flip, but might get fired or might get promoted and be a defensive coordinator for some other team? I don't know what the issue is there. As far as the running back, Audric Austin, here's a tweet that he sent out earlier today, and he put it out actually an hour and 10 minutes ago. He said, "I'll be signing my national letter of intent tomorrow." So, and this comes after, I guess, earlier in the week he said that he was going to wait until February to do so. And the reports were that he was looking at Iowa, or he was listening to, and it wasn't just reports. See, I think he actually admitted that he was listening to offers from Iowa, Wisconsin, Notre Dame, and Penn State. I would assume that his top 3 right now of those 5 would be Notre Dame, Penn State, and Michigan State, because obviously he's committed to Michigan State. Notre Dame is the best of those 3 schools right now, considering they have a good shot to make the college football playoff. And then Penn State is the closest geographically, being a border state to his home state of New Jersey.
Maybe he watched that Michigan State-Penn State game this last week and thought, man, I could walk right in and be the starting running back for the Nittany Lions.
That's a possibility. They don't have elite talent like they had a few years ago when they had Saquon Barkley and Miles Sanders. Their running back room doesn't look as good as it appeared to be at the start of the year, with Journey Brown having to retire from football and Noah Cain lasting 1 drive. I mean, right now they're going to be going into next year with 2 guys who are finishing this year as true freshmen, another guy who's finishing the year as a true sophomore, and then Noah Cain, who played 3 snaps all year. So there is the opportunity for him if he wants it there. I think that it's going to be a 3-way race between those teams, and if Mel Tucker can lock him in, that would be huge for the Spartans. They didn't have a dynamic run game this year. I think part of that was just because of their offensive line and having all the issues with coronavirus and not practicing. But this would be a huge get, because if you get him, odds are you're probably going to get his teammate and offensive lineman from that same high school, the 3-star, who has not committed yet.
Yeah, what about Michigan? What'd you think?
For Michigan, they certainly avoided Armageddon, because Armageddon would have been, not just two players on the defensive side of the ball deciding to flip, and I think we all knew that at least one player was going to flip. But if certainly J.J. McCarthy had decided to, and if you had 4 or 5 players deciding to flip, and maybe you had another 2 or 3 doing what Rayshon Benny and the running back that committed to Michigan State are doing, but nobody has done that from what I've seen. Nobody has decided to sit on the sideline. So I think from Michigan's perspective, that part's a win. But obviously, you look at the 2 that decided to go elsewhere. They're 4-star defensive players on that front 7. Michigan was pretty bad this year defensively. Particularly, I mean, I wouldn't even say particularly. They were pretty bad everywhere. And when you lose 2 guys that, given your pathetic defense, could have come in and been contributors immediately, that's a problem. I believe that also of the 12 who did sign, only 2 or 3 of them, I'm sorry, of their top 10 recruits, let me get this right, of the top 10 recruits according to 24/7, only 2 are on the defensive side of the football. So it's an offensive heavy class for Michigan, not defensive heavy. So, I mean, it looks like they're going to have to coach up the guys that are already there.
It looks like a Big 12 profile. That's what it looks like.
That's a possibility as well. So, and then you're going to have to rely on Josh Gaddis and Jim Harbaugh, offensive guys, to turn around the season next year. And if you keep Don Brown, hopefully he can coach up the guys that he has on the roster currently to get them back like they were a couple of years ago.
They're not keeping Don Brown.
Well, if it's not Don Brown, somebody else is going to have to come in to coach these guys up, because the best players that they recruited are on the offensive side of the football, not the defensive side. Maybe they can bring in some transfers, but in terms of fresh blood defensively, they're going to have to rely on their 3-stars and transfers and whoever they already have.
Yeah, you're right. Transfer portal is going to be big for whoever that new defensive coordinator is, and he's going to have to it's never good to hear that he's going to have to scheme it up, for them, but that's exactly what they're going to have to do.
Yeah, what did you think of the transfer quarterback from Michigan State? Because a lot of us thought that Mel Tucker was going to bring in a transfer quarterback for his first year at Michigan State. He decided not to, or either that or he failed to get someone to commit, and he went with Rocky Lombardi, and then at the end of the year gave Peyton Thorne an opportunity. Yesterday, one of the key acquisitions for the Spartans was Anthony Rousseau, a transfer quarterback from Temple, who last year set the completions record at 246 for Temple quarterbacks, but he completed less than 59% of his passes. This year, he only played 3 games due to coronavirus cancellations and injuries. What did you think of that acquisition?
Well, I think it was a good one. You can't get enough resources in at the quarterback position. It's the toughest position to recruit. It's the toughest position to develop. And it's the most important position by far on the football field. So I liked how Peyton Thorne looked in the second quarter for the Spartans, but not so much in the second half. But, Rocky Lombardi, I wouldn't be pinning my hopes on him, or Theo Day if I was a Spartan fan. So bringing in somebody else that can be in competition with Peyton Thorne, I think is a really good idea for Michigan State.
I have no issue with bringing in somebody to compete with Peyton Thorne, but I think if you're a Spartan fan, you can't be all that excited about Anthony Rousseau because he didn't give you much to be excited about. If you look at the numbers, I'll admit, I have not seen him play. I don't know if you've seen him play, but if you look at the 3 games that he played this year, they were against Navy, South Florida, and Memphis. Those are not top-tier teams, certainly not top-tier Big Ten teams. They couldn't compete with them. And in those 3 games, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So this year, 9 touchdowns, 6 picks for his Temple career, 44 touchdowns, and 32 interceptions. If I'm a Spartan fan, I'm hoping that Peyton Thorne wins the quarterback job over this probably Temple reject who's an interception machine. If he's throwing 3 interceptions against Memphis, what's he going to be doing against Indiana, against Ohio State, against Michigan, against Penn State? That looks kind of bad if I'm looking at it.
Well, look at just the quarterback room looks pretty bad from what we've seen. And trying to get anybody in there, I'm sure they would like to have gotten somebody more heralded than a quarterback from Temple. But Also, who knows what his backstory is and his connection with either Mel Tucker or their offensive coordinator there. Maybe there's something that they see in the guy. But, overall, I think what it says is that the three quarterbacks that they have, not a whole lot there, shown some flashes, Thorne. But, bringing somebody in, that guy could be the starter next year for him.
Yeah, well, and that's once again why I say if you're a Spartan fan, you should hope that Peyton Thorne is the guy. He's a redshirt freshman right now. He's going to be going into his second year in the program with Tucker. So I would assume that it's going to be, probably 50-50. Maybe Lombardi will still be in the mix, but I would assume it's going to be 50-50 in terms of who's going to win that job between Russo and Thorne. And if it's Russo, then that means that Thorne is probably a failure because Russo played for 3 years at Temple, and all he could manage in his final year was 9 touchdowns and 6 picks.
Good point. All right, as far as the feedback goes, and if you're out there watching the show right now live, you can type in on the live chat on YouTube, or you can take advantage of Facebook or Twitch. We're monitoring all three of those chat rooms here. DJ Major's already jumping in a little bit on the Lions, and I don't know, maybe somebody needs to test out the live chat. Maybe it's been a couple weeks like this. Maybe I've screwed up the chat room because we used to get 20 messages there in the last 2 weeks. We've not gotten any. So I could be user error on there. So maybe send one over just to see if it's working for me. If not, we're ready to get on to the next chapter.
Yeah, let's do that. That takes us to the second chapter.
And we will get to the Detroit Lions. Very busy week for your Detroit Lions as they bring Chris Spielman aboard and Barry Sanders. But the Lions first, we will get to that coming up, their pursuit of a GM and coach. But the Lions this week, they are going to be in Tennessee taking on the Titans, and Tennessee is an 11-point favorite. Brian, what are you looking for in this game?
I'm looking for, hopefully, Big Gretch legalizing mobile sports betting in the next 2 or 3 days. I don't think that's going to happen because I think that Titans minus 11 is easy money. Look, the Titans are the number 4 seed in the AFC, and they have a ton of reasons to play hard. They're tied with the Colts at 9-4, but own the tiebreaker over them, which is why they have the 4 seed, not the 6 seed. They're tied with the 5-seeded Browns at 9-4. They're 1 game ahead of the 7-seeded Dolphins and 8-seeded Ravens, who are the first team out of the playoffs. Additionally, they're a game behind the Bills for the number, the 3 seed, and 2 games behind the tanking Steelers for the 2 seed. So the Titans could move a heck of a lot up, a heck of a lot down. They have to be circling this game on the schedule saying, we have to beat the same old Lions. Meanwhile, the Lions are either going to get a terrible performance out of Matthew Stafford, who's injured, or a terrible performance out of Chase Daniel, who is basically a career backup. I don't expect Stafford to play because he looked so bad when he came out of that game. After he handed the ball off to Kerryon Johnson for the touchdown, he just walked off like this and had his head slooped down low. He didn't want to move a single muscle. He's got the rib cartilage damage. He didn't practice yesterday. He didn't practice today. Darrell Bevel said earlier in the week that when you've got a rib issue on the left side and you're a right-handed quarterback, that's a bigger issue than if you have it on the right side of your body because you use more of your left side to get that torque going to throw the football. So Matt Stafford is either going to look terrible or he's just flat out not going to play. I would assume he's not going to play. The Lions, when Matt Stafford doesn't play, they just flat out don't win. This should be a blowout when you look at a motivated Titans team against a not-so-motivated, injury-depleted same-old Lions squad that also is not going to have Kenny Galladay, who has not played in weeks. Also is probably not going to have Frank Ragnow, who's got a broken throat, and with Jeff Okudah on the injured list for the rest of the year. Darrell Roberts, another cornerback, didn't practice yesterday or today with a hip injury. This is going to be, this could be Titans by like 25.
Yeah, you paint a pretty bleak picture, but I think it's accurate. If it's up to Stafford, I think he'll play. He'll go through. We already know he would. He played with a broken shoulder. He'll go out there. He'll play. Played with a broken back. So, what's a couple broken ribs for Matt Stafford? But, they should put him down. They're out of the playoffs. There's no chance. Are they eliminated? Mathematically here? Is there absolutely any chance? Like just
No,
put a
they
bullet
can make it, because if they win out, they'll be 8-8, and the 7th seed is the Cardinals, and they're 7-6. So if they lose out, they'd be 7-9. But they're not making the playoffs.
Well, you know what? Then I could see Matt Stafford actually dragging his body out there and trying to do it. So I mean, to me, Jeff Okudah's season here, it was the last straw probably for Quinn and Patricia there when he looked so bad in that Green Bay game when they put him out there, and really it was a thumbs down. Doesn't mean he's going to be a bust for his entire career, but he had even for a corner as a rookie, adding it all in there, it was still very disappointing. But, you look on the other side, you got to deal with King Henry. And Derrick Henry is, if he can average 156 yards over his final 3 games, he could be the 8th running back in NFL history to get over 2,000 yards. I think he's looking at that Lions run defense, thinking maybe he can get to 2,000 maybe just in this game, or at least crack 200. I think, if he starts – would you say over or under 150 for Derrick Henry? I mean, to me, that's what you look at. I would take
over.
He gets better. He gets better later in the season. We've seen that the last couple of years, and he's got to be licking his chops, taking a look at that Lions defense coming in here. But, yeah, that's it. I mean, other than that, I got A.J. Brown on my fantasy team, so I think what the hope for the Lions is, if you're a fan, that you just go out there, some of the young guys can get some reps, and you don't get completely embarrassed out there. But no Matt Stafford. The one thing that the last couple of years that you've noticed when watching these backups, actually last year we went through it for the last 8 games, it's not very entertaining when you don't have number 9 under center.
No, and from a fantasy perspective, if you got Derrick Henry as your running back in the fantasy playoffs, you're in good shape. And if he's your opponent, is on your opponent's team, you're in bad shape. If this game goes like I think it is going to go, which is the Lions are going to have a lot of trouble scoring, and because they have a backup quarterback in there, because they have no Galladay, because they have a backup center snapping to a backup quarterback, although if they've been taking number 2 reps all year long, maybe they have some chemistry, then the Lions could get shut out in the first half. With their bad defense, they could be down 20-0 in the at the half, and then they're just going to give the ball to Derrick Henry for the entirety of the second half. He could have 20 carries for 150 yards in the second half alone. It's going to be ugly. And you just mentioned, what's the reason to watch this game with Matthew Stafford not playing and all that. They're really, like, unless you're going to be cynical like me and sit back and laugh, which I plan to do. It's going to be a very funny game to see them get clowned at Tennessee. There's not even much to look forward to see in terms of hope for the future.
Swift. Maybe Swift and can match King Henry.
Well, perhaps. But if you are the Titans, you're going to load up on DeAndre Swift. You're not going to be worried about Chase Daniel airing it out to Marvin Jones and Danny Amendola and Quintez Cephas and Mohamed Sanu. You're going to be focused on stopping DeAndre Swift. And DeAndre Swift wasn't 100% because of those headache injuries. When you consider no Matt Stafford, backup offensive lineman, when you don't have Jeff Okudah to look forward to see if he is going to have a late season run to look like the number 3 cornerback, when you consider that there's nobody else that's really even promising on the defensive side of the football, it's kind of demoralizing as you look forward to the next year as a Detroit Lions fan. But it is going to be nice if you're going to be looking at the draft positioning. Right now, they're currently slated to pick 11th, and they're not going to drop any further. They can only rise from there based on what's going to happen in 3 days.
Very, very cheery chapter from Brian Chapman.
Well, from you too.
I know. I'm right there with you. I'm not saying that you're, piling on or going overboard. It's accurate. Everything that you say, unfortunately, or I guess, fortunately at this point, is now accurate. Here is some of the feedback. Keith, what's up? He says, I predict that they will run for over 180 yards and 2 touchdowns at least. Talking about King Henry. 180 and 2 scores at least. He says, sorry for the typos. That was
I could see that. I could see King Henry
stumbling over that a little bit. Derrick Henry is going to have a field day unless the aliens kidnap him. There's one for you.
Or unless he comes down with coronavirus.
Henry will run all over the Lions. Here's Sideshow Sports. There it is. That's Raj. Do you think Galladay will play again this season?
I don't think so, because once again, when he first had that hip injury, the Lions specifically did not put him on injured reserve because they were hoping that he'd be back in less than 3 weeks, whether it be 1 week or 2 weeks. They said he was week to week. They thought they were in the playoff hunt at the time. Sheila Ford Hamp certainly thought they were in the playoff hunt, and it's been over a month and a half. And guess what? He did not practice yesterday. He did not practice today. You could be right about him having Calvin Johnson syndrome. Like, I'm not gonna go out there and risk injury, more injuries against these great opponents with this sorry team. Or it could be that the hip injury is just worse than everybody thought. I at this point, no, I certainly don't expect to see him this week, and I don't expect to see him for the rest of the year.
Well, it's hard. Like, the one thing we know is he's disgruntled. Like, I don't remember exactly how the tweet went, but when he didn't, like, there were a few guys that were cashing in on some extensions, and Galladay was in line for one. I mean, that's a big story. And when he didn't get his, there was some sort of Instagram or tweet from him about how this was going to cost the Lions, right? So, he does not have his money. He does not have his security. So could he just be, doing the Calvin Johnson routine? I normally don't like to speculate on injuries, but, it being a pandemic and everything and people speculating on whether, football teams are faking injuries and coronavirus, kind of seems like everything's fair game. Yeah, I think that there's a possibility that he's like, no, I'm going to sit tight with my hip until I get some more money.
Yeah, and I think the quote that he had on his Instagram was, "This bleep gonna cost y'all." It was like
that sounds pretty accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was trying to see if I could find the Instagram post on the fly, and it doesn't look like I can find it. But yeah, the quote I believe was, "This bleep gonna cost y'all," after he had some great game. Actually, you know what? I think I found it. Let me see if I can put that on the screen for you.
That'd be pretty impressive by you. It's just like that. I thought you had all the producers sending you everything over.
There
before.
We go.
Send me.
Can I enlarge it? Here we go. There's a little screenshot of Kenny Galladay, and it says, "This bleep gonna cost you. Don't let that go over y'all head." And that's from, that's like from 2 months ago, October 18th. And since then, what's he done? Played one game?
Yeah, it's not going over our heads. We continue to mention it every time we see him, not out there on the field. It makes you feel like if Kenny G was like, "Hey, man, why are you speculating at my hip? It really hurts." I'm like, you're the one that started.
Well, what's going to help his negotiating stance more? Sitting out and saying, "Look at what I've already done," or coming back in meaningless games and perhaps putting up some stats? I wonder. And that's assuming he's healthy enough to play.
Yeah, well, he wants to bounce out of Detroit. I can guarantee you that. So what would help for him is if they just went ahead and cut him or, gave him the Stephon Diggs treatment. But he is, that's what he's hoping for. What the Lions are probably going to do is franchise him. That's the way it looks like.
Well, he's the most franchisable player on the team. I mean, who else is worthy of getting the franchise tag right now? I can't think of anybody. They have a bad roster, and when you think about who's in line to get an extension this offseason, who's got an expiring contract, it's really Kenny Galladay.
Yeah, no, you're right. Keith says it's funny how I wanted the Lions to draft Henry one pick ahead, so the Lions got A'Shawn Robinson, who I thought would be good, but he got lionized. You know what, Keith? I remember that. You're right. Derrick Henry right there, and it didn't happen there for the Lions. You're right about that. I'll tell you one thing about Derrick Henry real quick is that they had to – this is a fantasy football thing, but it's also sometimes you just get lucky too. So the Titans, when they drafted Henry, they didn't bring him in to be the starter right away. Like they had DeMarco Murray, who used to be with the Cowboys, and then he was there with the Titans. And they had Dion Lewis, who they signed from the Patriots. That was kind of their 1-2 punch. And then, Henry would get in late in the games, and sometimes he would just take off for 80 yards. So I thought when he took over, Derrick Henry full-time, and they brought in Mike Vrabel, it'd be like, you know what? They'll know how to use Derrick Henry. They'll just give him the ball every freaking time. The guy's a monster. I mean, look at him. And Vrabel just didn't do it. he was given. You go back when he got the job, he was given Derrick Henry. He was splitting time with Dion Lewis, but he would get 3-4 carries, 15 yards. I had to drop him 2 years ago in my fantasy league, 4 or 5 games in, just like nothing there. Then finally, towards the end of the season, I don't know if they were out of it. I don't remember the exact circumstances. Maybe that's when they benched Mariota and put Tannehill in. Then they just started giving it to Henry, and then he just started racking him up. But they got to give a little bit lucky. It wasn't like they were like, oh, yeah, we knew King Henry was the king all along. It was like finally they were like, what the hell, let's just give him a bunch of carries and see what happens. So that was just an aside.
Yeah, well, it seems like whenever the Lions draft somebody in the second round, they always get injured. I mean, Michael LaShore ruptures his Achilles tendon. Kerryon Johnson, a whole bunch of knee injuries. And then this year you got concussion questions about DeAndre Swift. So,
the snail didn't have any injury concerns.
I was talking about running backs.
Oh, did Javid Best go late first, or was he a second
He was
round?
late first round, and I believe Kevin Jones, they traded up to get him late in the first round, but obviously they didn't pan out either.
No. We could do an entire show on Lions draft picks. That one, just zeroing in on the second round and running backs. Yeah, there you go. All right, that is it when it comes down to the feedback.
All right, let's turn the page to the third chapter, and we'll stick with the same old Lions and go to the race to become the next general manager of the team.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I should turn off my mic. I didn't mean to laugh at your opening statement there. Yeah, a race.
Yeah, well, somebody wants to be it. They've interviewed a whole bunch of internal candidates, and they all know that they have no chance to be the next general manager, but I'm sure they got at least a nice catered lunch with Martha or Sheila Ford and Chris Spielman on the opposite side of the Zoom. But the 3 names from outside of the organization that have emerged are, number 1, Louis Riddick of ESPN. He interviewed with the Texans yesterday. He'll interview with the same old Lions tomorrow. He played in the NFL for 7 years, worked as a scout, worked in front offices worked as a scout for 7 years and worked as a scout and played for 7 years and worked as a scout and in front offices for over a decade. He's been with ESPN since 2013. Next week, the Lions also plan to interview former Falcons GM Thomas Dimitrov. He was the GM for 13 years and was fired with Coach Dan Quinn 2 months ago. He gave the Falcons a Super Bowl appearance, a couple of NFC Championship appearances, and there's also the chance that the Lions might be giving the Patriots of the Great Lakes another opportunity, because next week they plan to interview Scott Pioli. He's a former Patriots executive who became the GM of the Chiefs in 2009, but by 2012 they were 2-14. Dennis, what do you think of these 3 GM candidates from outside of the Lions organization?
Well, the one thing, both Pioli and Dimitrov are off the Patriot tree there. And the one thing about Pioli is Kansas City handed him the keys and gave him a chance, and he burned. Like, he was great when he was with New England, not so good in Kansas City. I wouldn't go for Scott Pioli. Now, Dimitrov, that's a Patriot way. I mean, he was off the Patriot tree. The thing that jumps out to me, just reading Dave Burkett, I guess it was just a tweet that he had there, the connections with Dimitrov and Spielman and the Lions run really deep. He was in on scouting Spielman. The other, I forget what a couple other connections there when you take a look at it. So Dimitrov looked like, and plus Burkett was like, well, they wouldn't have to change their grading system because Dimitrov brings the same one that he learned when he was in New England. So,
yikes.
Well, I think, you would think, I don't think he was putting it out there like as a negative. That was a positive, however they grade out there. But because it's the Patriot way, immediately it's like the Lions just did that. It was a disaster. But Dimitrov was really successful. They should have won the Super Bowl. They should have. If it would, I had to ask myself this, and I'm going to ask everybody else out there, would it have changed if Atlanta had won that Super Bowl? And we were sitting here talking about Thomas Dimitrov as a possibility, because they should have won the Super Bowl. Not only were they up 28-3, if Shanahan is not dropping back the pass there in the fourth quarter and just runs the ball, if just falls over, takes the snap and falls over, they probably 99% chance that they win that Super Bowl, but they didn't, and they lost it, and so now he doesn't have the Super Bowl ring. So what, Dimitrov is pretty accomplished there. He's what he was able to do with a Falcon team that's very similar to the Lions, like especially with their quarterback Matt Ryan. There's not a quarterback in the league who compares to Matt Ryan than Matt Stafford. So he would have that situation. But I don't know, like because of the Patriot thing there and the Falcons blowing the Super Bowl, it kind of feels like when we were watching the Super Bowl, like if the Lions ever got there, that's how they would end up losing it,
Yes.
I mean, everybody was saying that, so do you want to bring in a guy who was the mastermind of all of that? Is he going to bring in Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator? I'd like to get away from New England. So Pioli and Dimitrov, I'm sorry, they just feel like they're tainted. As far as Louis Riddick goes, what's not to like about Louis Riddick? I like everything that he brings to the table. I don't care that he's a broadcaster. And I know people see it with Matt Millen, but it's worked out fine with Lynch in San Francisco. Him going to the booth and Louis Riddick looks like he's in demand. I think when it comes down to these general managers, is that all of them have fine resumes. It's really about their vision when you're sitting down there. And this was what I was afraid of if it was just Sheila Hamp and Rod Wood making the selection, is that they're going to listen to the presentations, and it's just who's going to be the best talker would probably get the job. Now that Spielman's in there, it's still going to be about the presentation and their vision and everything, but because of his football background there, I think that he's going to be the one that's making the call, and I feel a lot better about that than Hamp and Wood making the call. So if it's just like with the recruits that we talked about in the first segment. You talk to one, you talk to 100. They just talk about, it felt right. It was a comfort. It was in my heart. All of those things. That's what it's going to come down to. And so whatever's in the heart and mind and feel and the comfortability with Spielman, all of these guys, have the resume. So trying to dice it up, if I'm in there and Dimitrov walked in, I'd be like, oh, not the Patriots. I mean, but so I'm biased on that. I'm surprised they're even bringing Pioli and Dimitrov in.
Well, when it comes to having Chris Spielman in there, and you talk about who would be most likely to be hired if it was just Sheila Ford Hamp and Rod Wood making the decision, I think it'd be this guy who'd be the top choice, Louis Riddick, because guess what? He's paid right now to present himself well on television, and he does present himself well on television. Like you, though, I think that Scott Pioli needs to be out, because what he did in Kansas City was terrible. I think his first year they won 10 games or something like that, and they won the division championship. But you take that, and a couple of years later, you're 2-14. He was a guy who saw what the Patriots were doing with Matt Castle in 2008 and said, hey, we'll give you a 6-year, $63 million contract to be our long-term quarterback. And back then, that was close to top quarterback money. And obviously, Matt Castle did not continue to be a star quarterback or even a good quarterback like he was with the Patriots. And just last year, he was a 1-year stopgap option for the same old Lions as a backup quarterback to Matthew Stafford. Or maybe it was 2 years ago, and I don't even think he's in the league anymore. So Scott Pioli, he's got to be out. He tried the Patriot way, not just with bringing in Matt Castle, but he also brought in Romeo Crennel and Charlie Weiss to be his assistants, to be coordinators, and that didn't work out. I actually would be interested in Thomas Dimitrov, unlike you. I know that he had some Patriot way about him, and around here you don't like to talk about Patriot way, but he built an NFC champion. Scott Pioli never did anything like that. He had a 25-point lead in the Super Bowl. I mean, if the Detroit Lions had a 25-point lead in the Super Bowl and blew it, they would hang a banner that said, had a 25-point lead at one point in the Super Bowl. So I don't think that should sway Lions fans. He drafted an MVP. You said that there's not a whole lot of difference between Stafford and Ryan, and for the most part there isn't. But Matt Ryan won an MVP. Matt Stafford has only made 1.5 Pro Bowls. He drafted Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley for that offense. The Falcons this year started out 0-5, and then when they fired Quinn and Dimitrov, they've gone 4-4 since, which suggests that perhaps the biggest issue was the head coach and the players, maybe they weren't the issue, and the players were obviously brought in by Dimitrov. Additionally, you look at that 13-year tenure by Dimitrov, and if you label a typical Lions caliber year as 10 or more losses, he only did that 3 times, meaning 10 of those seasons were not like that. He had a 4-12 year in 2013. He has a 6-10 year in 2014, and this year they have 9 losses, look like they're going to 10. But the other 10 years, they won at least 7 games. And for Detroit Lions standards, if you just win 7 games, that's not a bad year. And obviously he had many years better than that, going to the Super Bowl, going to the NFC Championship game, winning 11 games, 13 games. I don't think the Lions have ever won 13 games in a season. So I'd be okay with him, even though he didn't finish his tenure in Atlanta well. As far as Louis Riddick, the guy that you see up there, I don't really have an opinion on him. He sounds good on TV, really good. But so did Matt Millen, and he did not work out. Mike Mayock sounded really good on TV and on Twitter, and he's been okay so far as the Oakland Raiders general manager. John Lynch sounded pretty good, and he's not done all that well. So I just don't have any idea if he's going to be good in his role. It's been, 7 years since he's worked for an NFL team. So I don't know. And like I said, I think if it was up to Hamp and to Wood, because of his charisma, because of his presence on TV, they would probably pick him.
No, I think all really decent points. And the Burkett tweet, when he was rolling out the connections between Spielman and Dimitrov, it just sounded like, whoa, it's going to be Dimitrov. All right, let's look at some of the feedback here. Keith says, please, no more Patriots. No more Patriots bullcrap, he says. I think Riddick would be a good choice. Mike L. on Facebook says, hello, Dennis and Brian. What's up, Mike? A little bullseye thrown your way here. And then Paul W. saying, how about Pat Kerwin for GM? Pat Kerwin, who I think does the drive show on NFL radio on Sirius XM. I listen to him once in a while with Jim Miller. Here he is. Now you're talking about a guy running a radio show with Pat Kerwin. Now that's right up our alley. What do you think?
Yeah, hey, we can run radio shows, so maybe we could lead the Lions. I mean, we couldn't do any worse than Matt Millen, I would assume. So if the Lions wanted to pay me a 7-figure salary per year to run their organization, and perhaps I could team up with you to figure out what to do, I would take it. I would go as hard as I could after it. I wouldn't have the necessary experience because my mom was too afraid of me having a frail body. I only played 1 year of middle school football, and she banned me from playing high school football. And obviously no college experience, no pro experience, no scouting experience, none of that stuff. But if they want to give me the money, I'll do it. Now, as far as Pat Kerwin, I would assume he's got more experience than us, but you just don't know.
It's been a while since Pat Kerwin has been in the mix there. He's been doing that radio show for a long time. So, I think that it's probably done for him. His window has shut there, but I wouldn't mind him getting an NFL job. I wouldn't mind sliding right into that afternoon slot on NFL radio. That's a great, just talking about the NFL every day. That would be pretty awesome.
And
all right,
as far as
more here, hire the 49ers assistant GM. I don't think they're going to do that.
Martin Mayhew.
Yeah, didn't play conservative as he's not the coach. Right, chap? Silly to blame the GM for blowing a 25-point lead in the Super Bowl. He put the team together. He got him there, and he didn't play conservative as he's not the coach.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the vitriol, the little bit of vitriol that we're getting on Thomas Dimitrov, well, once again, he had only 3 seasons that you could qualify as typical SOL caliber seasons or bad Lion seasons. In his first year as the general manager, he took a rookie quarterback in Matt Ryan, who I believe his first completed pass was against the Detroit Lions for a touchdown, but he took them with a rookie quarterback to an 11-5 season. Wouldn't that be awesome if in his first year as the Detroit Lions general manager, he was able to draft a quarterback in the top 10 as he did with Matt Ryan and lead them to an 11-5 season? Wasn't Matt Ryan drafted like 3rd overall?
Yes.
Yeah. So the Lions,
right up there.
they're not going to be drafting 3rd overall. They're going to be, probably in that 5 to 9 range. So they're probably not going to have the best or second best quarterback like the Falcons got. They'll probably be stuck with the third, fourth, or fifth best quarterback. But if he makes the right choice and that rookie quarterback can come in and lead them to an 11-5 year with the rookie of the year and win a playoff game, I think Lions fans aren't going to be concerned about, well, what about when he blew a 25-point lead when he wasn't coaching in the Super Bowl?
Most of it is that it feels like the Patriot way, but you point out, man, it's been a long way. It's a long ways away from the Patriots, and he actually had success somewhere else. So not bad points by you, Chap. Let's get to the fourth chapter.
Yeah, let's turn that page.
Yeah, that's me, and we'll have for the final weekend in college football, as we have the real championship Saturday here, and it's come down to these four teams. You just tell me, Chap, how do you see this thing playing out?
Well, you look at the rankings right now, and it's Bama, Notre Dame, Clemson, and Ohio State in the top four, with Texas A&M, Iowa State, Florida, Georgia, and Cincy as the first five out. I don't think the top four are going to change. I think there's going to be some shuffling. I think Alabama will stay put after beating Florida. Clemson, I predict they're going to beat Notre Dame. They're a 10.5-point favorite. I mean, think about that. You're competing for a college football playoff appearance, and you've already won the first game, and you're a 10.5-point favorite. I think that Clemson's going to win and cover that game. And then you look at the Deep South Buckeyes. They're going to beat Northwestern. If that happens, all the top four are going to advance to the college football playoff, with the potential exception of Notre Dame if they get completely shellacked. If we see a scenario where Clemson rolls over Notre Dame in the rematch 45-10, then I don't know how you put a team that just lost by 5 touchdowns into the college football playoff. And then if you're a team like Texas A&M who gets an opportunity to blow out Tennessee tomorrow on Saturday, then you could move in perhaps Iowa State. If Florida keeps it close, they wouldn't get in with 3 losses. But I would think that Texas A&M would have the opportunity to do so. The issue with the Notre Dame-Clemson scenario of Notre Dame not making it is, while Clemson's offense will be better with Trevor Lawrence in as quarterback as opposed to DJ Uiagalelei, I think I got that right. Trevor Lawrence is going to help the offense. An offense that scored 33 points in the first matchup in regulation. But he's not going to help the defense. And the defense gave up 33 points in regulation. That leads me to believe that there won't be any sort of blowout, that Notre Dame might drop back to number 3 or number 4 and be forced to play Alabama in that first game. But I think that there has to be like the biggest or one of the biggest shocking upsets of the college football season for one of these 4 teams to not make the playoff.
Yeah, I agree with you. Remember, it's not about, as we have seen with this committee, it's not like they're sitting over there. They can talk about all the metrics in the world. What they're looking for is the best matchup. It's a bottom line on that. Unless, Uwe Ungungale is over there on in plays, and I just wanted to say his name. Unless Notre Dame gets absolutely wasted. Notre Dame gets absolutely wasted. They're going to get in, even with a loss. Ohio State, they win, they're in. They lose, they're out. Clemson, they win, they're in. They lose, they're out. I don't think either of those things are going to happen. So the Notre Dame, the score, and if they get embarrassed out there on the field, that would be the thing. But, even if they lose by, 28 points, and you're sitting over there, you think America wants to see Alabama, Texas A&M? I mean, yeah, we've already seen that. No, they don't want to see that. They want to see Notre Dame in there. So I think it would be the Irish. And, of course, Alabama, they could lose the game, and they would still be in.
Well, and then you would bring in the whole conversation about what about Cincinnati or what about Coastal Carolina, because Texas A&M lost by 28 points to Alabama. If Notre Dame loses to Clemson by 28 or 35 points, you're saying why should they get another opportunity to do so? And, so then you don't want to put in a 2-loss Florida team, particularly if they become a 3-loss Florida team by losing to Alabama. If Georgia's lost a couple of games, you'd say, well, can you stick in Cincinnati? Does Cincinnati have a game this weekend? I think they do.
I think they do. I think so.
So, I mean, if Cincinnati wins by 30, I think it's against Tulsa. Could they leapfrog the 2-loss a Big 12 team, the 3-loss SEC team, the 1-loss SEC team in Texas A&M? Probably not. Coastal Carolina's not leaping like 7 teams to get into the final spot. But that would be. I think the next scenario would be: could you stick a Cincinnati or a Coastal Carolina in if Notre Dame gets blown out? And given that there's so much ground to make up based on the eyes of the committee, and I think based on the eye test by the rest of America, the answer would be no. They're not climbing up over all those teams.
Yeah, well, the thing about the group of 5 and the possibility that they would get one of the college football spots is a sham. I mean, that's never going to happen. If it was going to happen, it would happen this year. If you've watched how this committee has continued to back them out of there and have used no, the seemingly logic here in how they've moved those teams back and moved the other teams up. We've known it all along, but we just saw it play out here and have to watch them lie through their teeth here. I don't know. The college football playoff is for the Power 5 conferences and Notre Dame. The other teams that are in there in the group of 5, I guess it's fun to see their names up there, and it certainly creates a lot of conversation. The selection show, it gives them something to talk about all the time. It gives columnists that write about college football. Oh, my God, I can't believe, how what a disservice. It's been like this all the time. Like, people don't want to see Cincinnati take on Alabama. And, if the group of 5, a couple of years ago, somebody pointed out, would you watch the group of 5 play in a Final Four? This year it would be, Cincinnati, BYU, Coastal Carolina, and Louisiana. If in 2 weeks we had that Final Four, I mean, would you sit there with that? Would you circle that game and those games and say, oh, man, I really can't wait to watch those? No, and nobody in America would either. People like talking about the underdog, but they really don't want to see them play in the Final Four. You can say, yeah, that's what makes it great. Like, you do get them into the New Year's Day 6. Boise State, that game is held up for the test of time when they beat Oklahoma. So if they go to 8 teams, where you give the automatic bid to the conference winner, and then you have 3 at large, one of those should be, if you have a team, really consider them to get in there, and then you would have the underdog scenario. But they just don't want to do it right now. Nobody would watch it, and I know the teams say, just give us a chance. We can keep it close, and people say that. But then, it'll get terrible ratings. So, and the other argument is anybody can get beat by 30 by Alabama.
Well, that's true. I mean, Texas A&M lost by 28 points. But, you could also look at the big game that they had a couple of weeks ago between BYU and Coastal Carolina. That came down to literally the last play in what looked like the Rams and the Titans in the Super Bowl. And that showed that those two teams were evenly matched. If BYU had blown out Coastal Carolina, or Coastal Carolina had blown out BYU something like 38-13, then I think there might have been some folks raising an eyebrow saying, wow, this team blew out the opposition in what was supposed to be a great matchup. Coastal Carolina won by 25 points, and we knew that BYU was a pretty good team. This is a heck of a lot better than the competition that Coastal Carolina typically faces. Maybe they should be at least in the top 7 or 8. But when you're playing a nail biter against another team that's not even in the top 10, it's not going to fly with the idea that you should be in. I get folks saying let's give them a chance. But when you kind of had your chance in a playing game, and I think you needed to blow out the opposition, you didn't do that. I'll tell you this, though. I am this weekend rooting for chaos. I want to see that because I think like all year long we've known that these are the 4 teams for the most part that are going to make the CFP, at least after like the second or third week of the year when Georgia started to move out of the top 5 and top 10. But, I mean, obviously both of us would love to see the Deep South Buckeyes lose to the Northwestern Wildcats because we hate Ohio State. And I think a lot of folks around the country would like to see that as well because the Buckeyes have played 5 games and the Big Ten broke their own rules just to sneak them in the back door. But I would love to see chaos in the Notre Dame-Clemson game. Like, what if Clemson loses a second game? What are they really going to keep Clemson out and stick in Texas A&M? What if Florida beats Alabama? Are they going to put Florida in over an undefeated Ohio State team? Are they going to put them in over a 1-loss Clemson and a 1-loss Notre Dame? What if they win by double digits? I want to see some chaos.
Yeah, look, Alabama, I'll be rooting for the opponents the next 3 games. So that's probably going to be like, Florida, Clemson, and Ohio State. I'll probably be rooting for those teams against Alabama. I'll be rooting for Notre Dame over Clemson because I'd just like to see Clemson get popped and get out of there. And yeah, I'll be rooting for Northwestern.
Whoa.
So, those are the things I'll be rooting for. Whether or not it's going to happen, we'll see.
If Notre Dame wins the ACC championship, think about this. Like Notre Dame fans are known to be snobby, and as a program, they like to talk about we don't need to be a part of a conference. They are snobs. Think about how snobby they could be if they say, yeah, we tried out the whole conference thing once, and everybody said that you can't beat Trevor Lawrence, you can't beat Clemson, but we beat them twice. We won the ACC championship the one time we got an opportunity to do so. We've proven that we're just too good to be in a conference, so we're going to go back to being independent. I don't want Clemson to win. I don't want Notre Dame to beat Clemson.
Honestly, what I want to see is something close to the first game, which was the best game of the college football season. And really, heading into the year, we were talking
better
about
than Rutgers versus Michigan?
Oh, well, you know what? That's
3 overtimes?
That's in the top 5. The one thing, remember, we were talking all summer, it's like, man, if they can just get to the point where they actually have 4 teams and we have a college football playoff, who cares who's in there? Who cares about the arguments? Let's, that they're going to be able to play. So there is a part about that. But, Dabo Swinney wasn't, great through this pandemic. So that'd be something to root against him for as well.
Fair enough.
I'm tired of watching sunshine at Clemson. That's from Keith, who's tired of seeing Lawrence. Well, yeah, you've only got a couple more games of Trevor Lawrence. Plus, he missed the first time around. So there you go. Paul, if you want chaos, bring back to college football. What does it say? If you want chaos, bring ties. I'm sorry, back to college football. LOL.
No.
Yeah, Chapman likes ties.
No. Now, sometimes I pick the Lions to finish with a tie, like I did last year, and I was correct about that. But I don't like ties. I don't know if anybody likes ties. That's why people in America don't like soccer, because we don't like ties. That's a foreign thing.
I don't like ties. I don't like saying 50-50. I don't like saying 8-8. Pick a side. You got to do it. So, even if you're just like, I don't know. Well, pick one. Mm-hmm. Try it. Got to do it. One more. Zach Wilson is trash. Perfect for the Lions. That one coming in from Chima.
Chima
From
China?
He's chiming in. Zach Wilson is trash. I don't know if perfect for the Lions. I see why you say that. I've watched a little. He's really got a strong arm. He looks like a pretty good prospect to me. I'm not ready to write him off as
trash. He's
not
all that big.
No, he's not. Let's go to the last chapter, which is the fifth chapter.
Yep, the fifth chapter, the major wager. All right, remind everybody who you picked on Tuesday and what you're looking forward to this weekend.
I picked the Cardinals this past weekend, and I like their position coming up this weekend. I like the Browns. I'm going to ride the Browns, watching them on Monday night. They've been pretty good to me this week. They're playing the Giants, and, the Giants' offensive line is pitiful right now. The Browns need the game. I'm going to roll big on the Cleveland Browns for 100.
Yeah, and the Giants are not going to have Jason Garrett as their offensive coordinator this Sunday because he tested positive for COVID-19.
That might be a positive for them.
Yeah, they haven't been a great offensive team this year, that's for certain. On Tuesday, I picked Texas State to win by at least 10.5 over Texas A&M Corpus Christi. They won the game, but only by 5, so that was an L. On Saturday, the hottest team in the Big Ten East faces the worst team in the Big Ten West when Penn State hosts Illinois. Penn State is 3-0 since Thanksgiving, proving that they should be in the Big Ten championship game, while Ohio State's only won 1 game. Meanwhile, Illinois just fired Black Santa. Penn State is a 15.5-point favorite. I'm going to take my Nittany Lions to win over the Black Santa-less Illinois Fighting Illini and cover. I also like Clemson minus 10.5 against Notre Dame on Sunday. I like the Titans minus 11 against the same old Lions. And I like the Chiefs minus 3 against the Saints. The Saints, let's not forget, they just lost straight up to the Philadelphia Eagles with Taysom Hill as their quarterback.
Wow, a 5-pack from Chap. Look at that.
Just a couple of bonus. A couple bonuses.
Picks and major wager side. So Raj wants some advice for fantasy. Get a hold of me, Raj. I'll give you all the advice that you want. All right, that's going to do it. Coming up on Tuesday, we'll look back at the last weekend of college football, and we'll know who's in the college football playoff. Will there be any changes? Probably not. But we'll get to it on
Go
Tuesday.
Cats! Go Cats!
No question. Go Cats. We'll talk about it Tuesday on the Fifth Chapter. Thanks for watching. For Brian Chapman, I'm Dennis Fithian. Good night.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth Chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spitting the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune in to YouTube to watch the broadcast. You're gonna peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fifth Chapter.